Hi, boys and girls. So if you remember our last story that we read last week, Nuffle Bunny, we kind of started discussing the setting and what exactly that is. And I kind of want you to keep that in mind for our new story today called King of the Playground, okay? So in King of the Playground, we kind of want to think, how is the setting of this story important? And if you don't remember what the setting is, it is where the story takes place and what time the story takes place, whether it's the time of day, the time of year, maybe what else is going on at that time, okay? So keep those in mind as you read our story. We also read the other day a story that kind of introduced the plot to us, or what the problem of the story is, okay? So we want to keep that in mind. What is the problem of this story? And how do the characters solve that problem, okay? So go ahead and keep that in mind as you listen to King of the Playground by Phyllis, Reynolds, Naylor, illustrated by Naylor Malone. Okay? All right, I hope you enjoy our story today. Kevin put on his Spider-Man t-shirt, his Batman underpants, and his jeans with a horseshoe on each pocket. But he didn't feel brave, and he didn't feel lucky. He walked up the street to the playground. He wanted to go down the slide head first. But if Sammy was there, he wouldn't go down at all. Too late, Sammy was there.
"You can't come in," Sammy said. "I'm king of the playground."
And he told Kevin what he would do if he saw him on the slide. Kevin went back home. His father was making soup. "I thought you went to the playground," said Father.
"Sammy says if I go on the slide, he'll get a rope and tie me up,"
Kevin told him.
"He says he'll tie my hands and feet so tight that I'll never get loose."
"Wow," said Father. "Really? And what would you be doing while Sammy was tying you up? Just sitting there?" Kevin remembered when he tried to put a sweater on their cat.
"I'd be kicking my feet," he said.
"Right," said his dad. "That's one thing you could do." The next day, Kevin went to the playground and got as far as the swings.
"You can't play here," yelled Sammy, running over. "I'm king of the swings."
And he told Kevin what he would do if he saw him on the swings. Kevin went home and sat on the porch. Father was washing his car. "I thought you were going to the playground," Father called. Kevin shook his head.
"Sammy says if I go on the swings, he'll dig a hole and put me in it. He says he'll dig a hole so deep that I'll never get out."
Father smiled just a bit. "And how long do you think it would take Sammy to dig that hole?" Kevin remembered when he had helped his father dig holes for fence posts in the backyard.
"A long time," he said.
"And what would you be doing while Sammy was digging?"
"Well, I'd be kicking the dirt back in," said Kevin,
and smiled a little too. "Right," said his dad. "That's one thing you could do." The next day, Kevin went to the playground and tried to climb the monkey bars.
"You can't play here. I'm king of the monkey bars,"
Sammy shouted, and told Kevin what he would do if he saw him there again. Kevin went home and climbed up the maple tree. His father was working in the garden. "I thought you were going to the playground," said Father.
"Sammy says if I climb the monkey bars, he'll come over to our house and nail all the doors and windows shut, and we'll be trapped in forever."
Kevin looked at his father
and they both started to laugh. And while Sammy was nailing one door shut, we could just walk right out the other, Kevin said. Right, said his dad. The next morning, Kevin put on his Spider-Man t-shirt, his Batman underpants, and his jeans with a horseshoe on each pocket. He felt only a little bit brave and a little bit lucky. He walked up the street to the playground. Thump, 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 went his heart. Sammy was sitting by himself in the sandbox. It was a big sandbox, but when Sammy was in it, nobody else wanted to play. Kevin slowly walked over. You can't play here, Sammy yelled when he saw him. I'm king of the sandbox. Kevin put one foot in the box. Go home, Sammy yelled even louder. If you try to play here, I'll put you in a cage with bears in it. Kevin put his other foot in the sandbox. Well, then I'll have to ride on their backs and teach them tricks, he said. Sammy stared. You can't, he yelled. They're wild bears. Then I'll squeeze through the cage and escape. You can't, Sammy shouted. You're just too big. Well, then I'll take magic pills to make me little, said Kevin, beginning to smile. I'll get through the cage and hide. You can't, Sammy hollered. I'll run after you and pick you up and throw you in a trash can. Well, then I'll just take magic pills to make me big again, and then I'll drive away in a truck. You can't, bellowed Sammy. I'll go to the army and get a tank and chase the truck and push it off into the ocean. Try it, said Kevin. Sammy stopped hollering. What? He asked. Try it, said Kevin, and sat down. He began digging a tunnel at one end of the sandbox. For a moment, Sammy didn't say anything at all. But then he began digging a tunnel at his end of the sandbox. Faster and faster and farther they dug, until suddenly, whoomp! They bumped heads right in the middle. This time, Kevin laughed out loud. He wasn't sure, but he thought maybe Sammy was smiling too. I'm going to build the biggest fort in the world, Kevin said, and he began digging. Ha! said Sammy. It's got to have towers. It will, Kevin said. It's got to have a drawbridge, said Sammy. It will, Kevin said. And it's got to have a ditch all around, said Sammy. It will, Kevin said. Help me build it? No, Sammy told him, but he did. So, boys and girls, that was our story, King of the Playground. And that was a pretty cool story. It had a really, sort of big problem in the story that I think some of us might be able to relate to, or maybe we've had that kind of same problem happen. What was our problem in this story? Right, Sammy was kind of being really mean to Kevin and wouldn't let him play on the playground with him or anything like that. And we kind of talked about setting, and that was the big setting of our story was the playground. So that was kind of important because that's where all of the sort of Kevin and Sammy parts were happening in this story. So that was important because with the name of our story, King of the Playground, it kind of showed us that Sammy felt like he sort of was the boss of the whole place. And we know that that's not true. He wasn't the boss of the playground. There is no boss of the playground. So we talked about our problem. How did Kevin sort of solve this problem, or what was the solution to Sammy trying to boss him around? Good. He kind of like talked with his dad, and basically his dad said if you just kind of ignore him or kind of, stand up against him, he's probably not going to bother you anymore. And how did that work out for Kevin? Good. At the end of his story, he kind of stood up, told Sammy that he wasn't going to listen to him. And in the end of the story, they ended up kind of even being friends, which I wasn't really expecting that. So that kind of took me by surprise. Kind of was cool how, Kevin told him, I'm not going to listen to you. And Sammy just kind of got over it and quit being mean. And they actually built a nice, cool sandcastle fort together. So that was a really good solution to the problem of that story. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed King of the Playground, and I will see you next time for our next story. Bye-bye.